Hello everyone, welcome to Audible Wisdom. Protect your eyes with your ears. I hope you enjoy listening to books.
Why is it that when we're overconfident, it's a sign that we're about to make a mistake? Are the stock market gurus really that good? Today we're going to look at the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's written by Daniel Kahneman, winner of the 2002 Nobel Prize in Economics. In the history of the Nobel Prize, he is the first psychologist to win the Nobel Prize in Economics. Before we get to his contributions, I'd like to introduce you to two strangers who live inside your head. The first one is called System 1. It's not a very friendly name, but it's a great companion in your life. It's the reason we spend most of our daily lives on autopilot. System 1 is very busy. It's on 24/7. You can't even turn it off. Even better, it uses very little energy to operate. On the downside, it's not very good at math. It can only do basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's so dumb that it's often changed by hints. It doesn't like complexity and longs for simplicity. No harm done. The other stranger is System 2. Compared to System 1, it uses a lot of energy to function, so it spends most of its time sleeping. That sounds like a good deal. But when it wakes up, it's usually to deal with a difficult problem. That's okay. It's best at complex tasks. And it's also the rational commander of your mind. When your favorite coworker asks you out for afternoon tea, System 2 rationally tells you, you have to finish that development paper this afternoon. You can't leave the office. I've used a simple example to show how the two systems work. Imagine you're driving down a familiar street. Not only can you drink tea and listen to the radio in the car, you can even talk to the person in the passenger seat. But if you're driving in a strange city today, you need to keep your eyes on the navigation system to get your bearings. You need to pay attention to traffic signs and nearby traffic. When you encounter these situations, System 1 wakes up System 2 and asks it to help you process all this complex information. But because the system is so energy intensive, so you might want to turn off the music. If the situation allows, you'll ask the person next to you to stop talking. System 2 makes sure that the most important tasks are done correctly. It blocks out the rest of the noise. This may surprise you. Wow, our minds work so well. But you also need to be reminded. There are many times in life when System 1 feels good about itself, and System 2 puts too much trust in the decisions of System 1. And what's the result? Unfortunately, we can be very irrational. In life, we tend to make a lot of predictions based on small clues. These predictions can become your preconceived answers for the rest of your life, or they can become the rules of your behavior later on. Let's look at an experiment that was done in Germany. Scientists asked one group of students to walk around the classroom at a much slower pace than normal, while another group of students walked at a normal pace. When they were finished, the scientists took out some English word cards and asked the students if a word on one of the cards was a word he knew. He could raise his hand and answer immediately. When the experiment is over, the students who were asked to walk at a slower pace were able to recognize the words such as lonely, forgetful, old, and so on, faster than the other group. So here's the question. Why did this group of students recognize these words more quickly? Let's introduce another experiment. In this experiment, students were asked to use a computer to answer questions. But the process of answering the questions is not the point. What's really important is that the students had different desktops. Some of the students' desktops were landscapes or animals, and some were about money. In the process of answering the questions, the scientists arranged it so that there would be situations where someone would need to be helped. For example, someone might drop something or ask for help. At the end of the experiment, the students whose desks were covered with money were more reluctant to help than the others. Why was that? Just having a different desktop theme can cause a change in behavior. In fact, both experiments were designed to test the priming effect. Priming effect means when a person is exposed to a certain stimulus, that stimulus will influence his or her subsequent behavior. The group of students who were asked to walk very slowly were primed by the fact that they were walking slowly. And the trigger for the second experiment was a desktop with money on it. If you want to visualize this trigger in a simpler way, you can think of these triggers as a meteorite. When this meteor hits your System 1, System 1 will reach out with many tentacles, These tentacles will grab things that are related to the trigger. For a slow learner, that's when the information about old age comes into his brain. That's why he was able to recognize the English cards more quickly. And the students in the second experiment, money made them think of selfishness or dominance. So their behavior was unconsciously based on that idea. Where do you see these triggers in life? Well, for example, billboards outside of big box stores often show people enjoying a meal with fine cutlery. This triggers you to spend more than your budget as you walk through the food court. Dairy advertisers, for example, have a habit of placing their ads against the backdrop of a beautiful pasture. No doubt they want you to associate their products with health and sunshine. And there's a more subtle marketing strategy that has a much deeper impact on you. Are you confident? Here's a math problem. Let's say a bat and a baseball cost $1.1, and a bat costs $1 more than a baseball. How much does a baseball cost? Obviously, this is a trick question. It's a trap question to see if the respondent is gullible enough to trust his or her intuition. In a psychology experiment, half of the students who participated in the experiment were forced to smile, while the other half were forced to frown. The results showed the students who frowned got a significantly higher percentage of questions correct than those who smiled. Why is that? Does making a bad face increase our IQ? No, it doesn't. It's about cognitive relaxation. Let's say I write 1, 2, space, 4. I ask you what to put in the space. Most people would confidently say 3, and you wouldn't feel the least bit uncomfortable, because the basic arithmetic system does it. So your brain's energy consumption is very low. You'll feel relaxed, even happy. So back to the smiling group. Your smile is telling your brain, everything is fine now, so please don't worry. So System 1 doesn't feel the need to wake up System 2, even though System 2 is more rational and judgmental. But the frowning students have a much harder time. Their facial expressions send the opposite message to the brain. Wake up System 2. The question at hand doesn't seem so easy. So the frowning students are more likely to answer correctly. A baseball costs 5 cents instead of the 10 cents. Life is full of examples of how we can control our cognitive relaxation. For example, there's the soft music playing in the grocery store. It keeps you in a happy mood. And System 2 doesn't get in the way when you buy too many things, like catchy jingles or jargon. It makes it easy for you to believe it's true in a cognitively indulgent way. Now we'll talk about how System 1 tricks you into giving plausible answers. A little genius for simplifying questions. If I ask you if you've been happy this year, you'll probably start thinking about how happy I am right now. If asked, is that person suitable for the lifelong partner? You'll probably just think about how much I like him now. Why do we unconsciously change the questions? Well, the reason is that System 1 tends to dislike complexity, and System 1 will only ask about recent events. After all, to access the huge database for answers, you'd have to wake up System 2. So System 1 automatically simplifies a big question into a simple one. You might even say it helps your brain find a shortcut. For example, many centrist voters often boil it down to how well the candidate did in the debate when evaluating a candidate's ability to lead the country. And there's an emotional aspect to that shortcut. Let's say I ask you right now, how many dates have you had in the first half of the year? And then I ask you, are you happy now? I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that your answer to whether or not you're happy is going to be heavily influenced by the previous question, which is how many dates you've had. That's System 1's way of finding shortcuts. That's because the emotional response to the first question is still partially in your head. So when you're asked the second question, System 1 runs into that emotional residue. And at the same time, it thinks, could this be a clue to an easy answer? So two separate questions are linked. But if you reverse the order of the questions, the emotional residue doesn't happen. Which brings us to the question, why is it that when a public figure makes a mistake, people dig up information about his past and accuse him of all sorts of things? That's what I was thinking. We see a story about a man having an affair and we say, well, I'll tell you what, I knew he was a womanizer when I saw him. When we see a female politician get elected, and it's revealed that she has a rich family, then the public thinks she got there because of her family. This phenomenon of looking at cause and effect is known in psychology as hindsight bias. Because System 1 likes consistency, so when a result is bad, we tend to think it was wrong in the first place. and vice versa, good results lead us to think of good reasons. This seemingly insignificant psychological bias can have a huge impact on our lives. Think about what happens when you're hospitalized. When an operation fails and a patient dies, it's easy to blame the doctor. You blame the doctor for being wrong, but the public doesn't bother to check whether the doctor made the right decision. It's just that there are so many uncontrollable factors in the condition of the patient and in the procedure. Over time, this bias can lead doctors to treat critical patients as if they were balls, and they don't want to take responsibility for them. And they may ask the patient to undergo too many time-consuming tests. These doctors don't want to get a bad reputation for making courageous decisions. This approach causes patients to miss the best time for treatment and even regret. It's fair to say that this bias makes people who would otherwise take risks more cautious. On the contrary, there are doctors who dare to make decisions only when they are 100% sure, and yet they have gained a great reputation in society. In the end, this bias causes society to miss out on the real heroes. Next up, there's a certain stock market celebrity who's been predicting the stock market for a while now, and he's been dubbed the new god of the stock market. Is this true? What's with the hot hand? The U.S. conducted a study of kidney cancer in 3,141 counties across the country. It turns out that the lowest incidence rates are in rural areas. Do you know what the public thinks? The air must be cleaner, the water less polluted. But guess what? The counties with the highest incidence rates were also in rural areas. The public has a different idea. I guessed it. Not enough medical resources in the countryside, limited medical resources. So what do you think? Here's a quiz to give you a clue. There's a box with a red ball and a white ball in it. Now you're being asked, is it more likely that you'll draw a red ball 4 times in a row than a white ball 7 times in a row? I think most people would say yes. Let's think about it in simple terms. It's easier to win the lottery with 4 codes than with 7 codes, right? Well, statistically speaking, when the sample size is small, the chances of an extreme situation occurring are higher. Therefore, if a kidney cancer investigator goes to a rural county, there's obviously a lot less people here than in the more affluent counties. So when an investigator comes in for a health check, there's a higher chance of an extremely low or high incidence than in a larger county. And that would explain why the highest and lowest rates are in remote areas. But in fact, if you extend the survey period, the rates in those counties would close to the national average. But our System 1 is bad at math, so the public prefers to give its own reasons for a given result. What situations in life are similar to this example? Some stock market celebrities or lecturers tend to be called New Age stockbrokers because of certain maneuvers. But if you look at their career investment results, these moves are just extreme phenomena for a short period of time. Over the long term, everyone's performance is close to average. From what we've shared today, it's easy to see that there are many triggers or cognitive relaxations in our lives. This leads to an overconfidence in our System 1, which thinks it can make decisions on its own without System 2. So it's easy for us to feel that we're doing the right thing just because it's going well. Socially, the hindsight effect makes experts cautious. It makes the shy people who are lucky into the stars of tomorrow. People make up their own explanations for random events and ignore most of them. In the end, it all comes back to the average. This book, unlike other psychology books, does not give the reader a lot of ready-to-use methods. What the author is trying to get across to the reader is that he wants us to be aware of the existence of these effects and the systematic flaws in the way our minds work. If we go through life being more willing to wake up System 2 and tire ourselves out when we need to, then we can maintain a modicum of sanity in an unpredictable world. In conclusion, when we're overconfident about something, it's often time to look at your decision. If you're excited for future videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Leave a message if you have something to say. See you next time.